I spent $169,000 on coaching, and here are the receipts to prove it. There's 5 business coaches totaling $70,000, then $20,000 making sure I don't get divorced, and $52,800 for a practical philosopher. Yep, as an ex-Wall Street guy who left a $2 million salary without a plan, I needed all the help that I could get. And I'm a huge believer that coaching is a superpower, but with the flood of Instagram life coaches promising to manifest a new reality or be the CEO of your own life, I could see why you'd think it's all snake oil. In this video, I'll break down 12 individual coaching experiences. I invested a ton of money in coaches to scale my business, be a better husband and father, and most importantly, get the heck out of my own way. But before we jump into the video, a quick message to hard-charging professionals and entrepreneurs working on Wall Street, in law, and in FANG who find themselves at a career crossroads wondering, is this it? Or just going through the motions for a fat paycheck. If that's you, we've got a group coaching cohort that will help you find deep satisfaction in your work while rethinking your relationship with ambition and money. Now let's meet our first coach. So the first one we will call Life Coach 1. This was the first coach I ever hired. And I'll give you a little backstory. I was actually still at BlackRock. I had made the decision to leave, but I wanted a coach. But here's the reason why I wanted the coach. I wanted the coach because I had heard through the grapevine that many other people who I respected professionally, whether they were on Wall Street or whether they were entrepreneurs, had coaches. And really, I had fucking FOMO. I was like, if that high performer has something that I don't have, no fair, I want it. And so that is actually how I found my first coach. So again, I think an important thing here is you have to meet people where they are. And so I entered coaching through the lens of intense self-improvement, and I'm still in coaching a decade later, but my goals have changed tremendously, and we'll talk about that. So the first coach that I hired, I remember we were on the phone and she said something that really stuck with me. Now, again, remember, I was going to leave BlackRock, but I hadn't left yet. I probably had like 6 more months. She said, the hardest distance to travel are the 18 inches from your head to your heart. And I was like, whoa, what is that? I didn't even know what it meant, but I'm like, oh my God, I'm such a type A, Enneagram 3, heady, empiricist, engineer. I live in my head all the time. I'm like, what is my heart besides just this organism that pumps blood through my body and allows me to use my brain? I'm like, I never thought of my heart in words such as love and care and respect and feelings, right? Like really being able to feel. And so that got me intrigued. Now, this coach, she was a former executive at a bunch of prominent CPG brands and had mentored a lot of people, and over the years realized she needed to get out. And so she was also similar to me in the sense that I could see myself in some of her life decisions, and presumably she could see herself in me. So we started working together, and we would meet every 2 or 3 weeks, and we worked together probably for about a year. So I was thinking about leaving, and I left, and we continued to work together. And I actually went back. There's an old podcast that's not even online anymore where I interviewed her and had her walk, like, what were you thinking when I first walked in? And she remembers, she said, you were a force of nature. And she says how we would meet at 8 at WeWork, 8 a.m. And by 8 a.m., I had already exercised CrossFit, had a meeting with someone at 6 o'clock, 6:30, and then 6:30 to 7:45, and then would meet with her at 8 o'clock. So my days would start at 4:45 back then. And she just like, there was just this intensity. You were hopped up on caffeine and just really just driving. Like, I'm so driven. I'm so competitive. I want to do more. But at the same time, there was this part of me that was just wondering, like, how sustainable is this? And I was, whenever I enter coaching, I really surrender to the coach. I'm just like, whatever you ask me to do, I'm going to give 120%, even if I think it's weird, even if I think it makes no sense. If you give me homework, I'm going to do the homework. So, a very front row student in that. And so I was kind of thinking back some of the things that we worked on together. And keep in mind, I'm 35 years at this point, and I have, very kind of stoic immigrant parents that say things like, if you're thinking about your happiness, you should get back to work, right? Feelings, introspection, therapy, self-analysis, self-awareness. Those were I'm like, yo, I got to work and make money and work out, like, and get drunk on the weekends. Those were the things that motivated me. And so I want you to take all of this in the backdrop that, like, this is the first time that I had voiced specific problems, for specific challenges, specific insecurities. I never, ever, ever shared them with anyone. And so I think just that, especially if you've never worked with a coach before, just that will show you, like, whoa, it's like, who have you been vulnerable to? Who have you shared an insecurity with? Who have you gone to when you have a relationship that's really stressing you out? And so this first coach was the first time I had ever done that. Now, I went through some of the notes that we had worked on, and it was a few things. One was I had a very complex relationship with time. The second was a hardcore scarcity mindset. The third was fear of death, and the fourth was savage inner critic. I won't go through each of these, but on the time thing, I was so regimented about time. Every minute this coach talked about how I would brag. It was like, 17, I read one book a week. I have 17 networking meetings a week. I work out 90 minutes a day, 6 days a week. Every minute of time was scheduled. And there was a tremendous amount of pride in that, but there was a tremendous amount of anxiety in that. And there's entire episodes to be done about unwinding this kind of tense relationship with time. But the one that really sticks with me is that I used to think of time as this commodity, right? This thing that obviously you can't capture it, but it's all units of time are created equally, right? And so, there's this concept by the Greek philosophers of Kairos and Chronos. So Chronos time is sequential time, kind of the way we know time. But Kairos time is this experience time. So I'll give you an example, right? If you have an hour in the Monday morning meeting or an hour of anticipating your favorite band coming up, those hours land. They're the same amount of Chronos time, but the Kairos time, the way you experience it, are totally different. And that little, I think this was the thing about the early coaching. This was almost 10 years ago. The early coaching that I did was that these like little shifts in how you see the world start to compound over time. So that was the idea of Chronos and Kairos time. We talked a lot about this kind of scarcity. Similar thing with money. Money is something to be hoarded. Money is something to be protected dearly. Money is something to be counted, right? And back then, still to this day, it's funny to actually rethink these things and compare where you are a decade later. But money was the scoreboard. In fact, I recently did an episode with Joe Hudson about money being a scoreboard, how I still feel that there's a scoreboard of validation. But I had this money with this coach in particular. There was another shoe that was going to drop. There was always something that was about to go wrong. And so that is something that we worked on, especially because I didn't really want money. that much. I didn't spend that much money. In fact, a lot of the work that she was doing was encouraging me to spend more. She was on the moon when I booked business class seats for the first time. By the way, we've only done it one other time since. So clearly some things haven't been unwound. But so there was this relationship with money, this like bracing for the next shoe to drop and the comparison with others. Next up, we had an inner critic. I had a nasty, nasty, violent inner critic that was so mean and so abrasive that would beat myself. I remember I dropped my phone once, my new iPhone, maybe like iPhone 8. The screen just cracked a tiny bit. And the whole subway ride from Bleecker Street to 52nd Street, 6th train, I was cursing myself out. You fucking idiot. Fuck is wrong with you? You're never going to amount to anything if you keep making silly mistakes like that. And so this inner critic that I thought it was the only way, again, this kind of little opening. I thought having a harsh inner critic was the only way that you can motivate yourself. And it turns out that there were other ways. And I remember vividly, if you have this harsh inner critic, I remember this coach telling me, pay attention to your thoughts, your inner monologue, and what percentage of it is really angry and mean, and what percentage of it is calm, kind of like the strict Asian, strict parents, silent dad type. And I remember at first it was 98% savage critic and 2% gentle, and over just by bringing awareness. And again, this was really this powerful nature of this work with this first coach, just teaching you to bring awareness. When you bring awareness to things like, oh, I beat myself up a lot, and you actually just pay attention to that, it loosens the grip that those behaviors, those patterns have on you. And lastly, we talked a lot about this fear of death, which I'll actually cover with the next coach. So that was what I call life coach number one. Now, you realize I'm not going to give names as I go through the list here, because I don't want this to be an endorsement or a critique. I would respend the money on all these coaches. So there's no critique, but some people might be listening, and some of these coaches have also retired or moved on to other things. Some have capacity constraints. But if any of these sound compelling to you, please do reach out, and I'd be happy to share their names privately. All right. The next coach. This coach was practical philosopher and probably one of the most impactful people I've ever met in my life. And I do see that this coach built on a lot of what was worked on with the first coach. I ended up working with this coach for almost 4 years. And so we would philosophize about my life and things related to my life for 2 to 3.5 hours at a time. This coach had a rule, don't schedule a meeting after our session, because we're just going to talk until we know when it's time to stop. And so this was a really, really powerful coach. He was a non-dual, which I'm starting to understand more now. I think non-dualism would be the umbrella term of Buddhism. But he was a non-dual in the sense that, and I'm going to butcher this, I actually had to ask ChatGPT to explain this to me earlier, that there's not really a belief in good or bad or true or false dualities, hot or cold. The non-dual believes that there's just this kind of one way of experiencing the world. There's a heavy emphasis on meditation, which I'll talk about. But these are just when we say something is good or bad, these are constructs or forms in which we then become beholden to. I probably lost some of you there. It took me a while to really grok what that meant. I'm still really trying to understand that. But I say that because he combined this spiritual non-dual perspective with a heavy emphasis on meditation with a deep, deep rigor of philosophy. And so I remember we would have these conversations where I would say something like, it's really important to read a lot of books. And then we would just say, well, why is it important to read books? Well, because reading books makes you smarter. Well, how do you define being smart? Well, being smart means having access to a lot of information. Why is it important to have access to a lot of information? Because you can make money. Why? And so we would go through these kind of very Socratic conversations on pick a word, impact. Why is it important? I remember we were talking about impact. When Russia invaded Ukraine, I felt a tremendous amount of guilt that I wasn't doing anything, just making an occasional financial decision. And we talked about like what is the role? What is one's role in peace? How do you address horrible atrocities in the world that you have no control over? How can you be happy and at peace when you know those things are happening? And so it was so deeply, deeply, deeply philosophical. One of the concepts that I really remember him introducing me to was this concept of samskaras, which were these recurring negative thought patterns. And so for me, these samskaras were, I'm not enough. I'm not worthy of love. I'm a bad person. And it would be, these samskaras, they're kind of these cracks in your brain where if you believe that you're an unworthy person, then you miss a promotion, you kind of pour it through the track, and it's related to your unworthy. Your lack of a promotion is tied to your unworthiness. And so we talked a lot about these kind of recurring samskaras. This coach was also the first person that I ever spoke to about how ashamed I was about losing my hair. And so this was something I started to first notice some follicle leakage in junior year, summer of junior year. I remember exactly where I was, what that shower looked like. And while I wouldn't say that it made me depressed, it was just this kind of dark cloud that to this day still hangs above my head. I joked with a friend, Devin, shout out Devin, Paid in Full podcast, that I hate going to Target because Target has the security cameras on the self-checkout, and it literally is like points right at my bald spot. You're watching this on YouTube or Spotify. I do a really good job of hiding that. I want you to think that I have a full head of hair, but know that, party, it's like the opposite, right? Business up front, party in the back, or loneliness in the back. But I had never spoken to anyone about that. And that's funny. I probably told this story before, but I would secretly order Rogaine from Walmart.com because I didn't want it to show up in the cart history. And so Lisa could see it, and I would like get it from the doorman and rip off all the labels so that it just looked like these like tin mousse, like hair mousse bottles. And then put them in the medicine cabinet while Lisa and I were dating. And it's funny. I spoke to Andrew for the first time, even before I spoke to Lisa. And she's like, duh, what did you think? I'm not an idiot. I know what a Rogaine bottle with no fucking label looks like, you moron. But think about it. If there's something you're carrying that you're ashamed of, that is embarrassing you, that you're scared of, imagine never talking about it for 20 years and on your 40th birthday saying it to a coach. That's the power of these coaching relationships. Like, it took me 20 fucking years to say it out loud. Now I say it on my podcast, but I'm still like, next time I see some of you in person, you're going to look, you're going to get that angle. I know the angles, right? And so I pulled out one of the things he said. He said, the email follow-ups was, hair loss is painful for you because it's getting to the heart of some of the things that you care about. Let's look at these five basic conception. Vanity. It's probably the most obvious one. You may not be the vainest person in the world to feel and believe I care about looking good. I care about being handsome and attractive. But the trouble is that being bald in many cases is something that may cause one to believe that one is ugly or less handsome than one used to be. All right. Number 2, greatness and perfection. Hair loss being your hair loss is an asterisk, a word that you used on many occasions. You could have a nice body and a strong will, but you will always be capped at a 90 out of 100 because of hair loss. These are his words. The limits of human agency. I'm not even going to read that one out loud. Number 4, being a fraud. I think I can make more sense of your metaphorical understanding of fraud after I give this conversation much thought. To be sure, you have the fear of being judged, but judged for what? Because of what? I'm afraid that others will find out that I'm not everything they believe I am, hence why many of you have never seen this, right? And then number 5, I don't even need to read it. This is the title. Something's deeply wrong with me. So these are the type, and this is in a fucking email after the session, but these are the types of conversations that we were having for 4 years, right? There is one time when like, should Lisa and I have an open marriage, right? I'm like, I don't know. Let me ask it. Let me ask this coach, right? So this was the coach that I worked with for the longest, 4 years. Really, really incredible human. All right. Next up, I want to just do a brief segue to talk about meditation. I guess I didn't formally have a coach in meditation, but I initially started meditating right when I left Wall Street. And why I'm a big believer, it's been 10 years now. I'm a big believer in meditation, but I'm also don't want to be that like whack job that's like, you got it. Meditation's going to solve all of your problems. I think it's like anything, it's another powerful tool in the toolkit. How powerful it is, I'll just tell you. For 9 years, I keep doing it. Now I'm up to an hour and 20 minutes a day. And so I've meditated for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of minutes. And it really, it allows me to see through a lot of my own bullshit. Right. And I don't know if there's a specific time when I realized that was happening. Like anything, it's probably pretty gradual. But meditation allows me to see through my bullshit, see through my samskaras, see through my insecurities, and ultimately see myself for who I truly am. All right, let's do a brief interlude. We're gonna pivot into money. Coaches that make you money. But before that, how to find coaches. I have used a very simple approach to finding coaches, and it's all through word of mouth. Now, I often ask friends, at this point, coaching is quite common. I'm constantly asking friends if they mention a coach. I'm like, oh, what did they help you in? What do they help you with? How much do they cost? Are they Zoom? Are they this? Are they trained in a specific modality? So I've always used word of mouth, and I collect coaches. And when people ask me for coaches, I just send them this list of people who have been referred to me over the years. I listen to a lot of podcasts that are hosted by coaches, and I listen to a lot of coaches on other people's podcasts. And if there's someone who I find intriguing, I just go straight to their webpage, DM them, and just say, hey, I'm interested in learning more. I'm very much of the belief, oftentimes you can do a few sessions together, see if there's a fit. That has happened a few times where there's just not been a fit. And usually it's a personality fit. In my early days, I wanted someone who really could relate to me. So this first coach with that drive and leaving corporate and all of those, having been there before. And I think that's why a lot of people are attracted to me as a coach is I've walked in those shoes on Wall Street. I've walked in those shoes of leaving a 7-figure job. I'm very transparent about the challenges that I have in different domains of my life. I like making money. I meditate, so people it's important for a lot of people to see themselves. in their coach, but that's not a requirement. That's just something that I personally like. Some therapists will say that, there's a red line where you don't share anything about your story when you're coaching people. Another thing about coaching is oftentimes the best coach I find are the ones that ask the best question. And oftentimes a coach is actually just a mirror back to you, right? They'll just literally say the thing. You're like, I feel sad because I'm losing my hair. And they'll say, why do you feel sad? Because you're losing your hair. It's like, it's that fucking simple, folks. So I think the rapport, however you get that rapport, and know that you'll be willing to surrender into it. All right, let's talk about business coaches. All right, we'll come back to business coaches, then we'll jump into nutrition and then family coaches. So business coaches, there were 5 of them: a marketing coach, a search engine optimization coach, ghostwriting coach, product design coach, and copywriting coach. And my approach to business coaching is probably different than others. I call it coaching versus consulting because I don't look for coaches who do done for you services, maybe with the exception of ghostwriting. And what I mean by that is, if I want to come up with a course, I don't go to a coach and say, here's all my stuff. Give me a course. Instead, there'll be an iterative process around what kind of business do you want to start, what kind of course do you want to start, and so on. And I do a lot of the work. And so here's how I usually approach it. Anytime I'm learning a new skills, and being an online entrepreneur forces you to learn a lot of new skills, I try to get to from 0 to 20 by myself. So I try to learn it on my own and get my hands dirty. You see me right now with YouTube. I'm 6-7 months in. I still edit my own videos. I want to get my hands dirty before I hire an editor. I still make my own thumbnails. So I get 0 to 20, and then I use the coach to level me up from 20 to hopefully 100, but usually it gets me to 60. And then at 60, I decide, do I want to, is 60 might be good enough or something? 60 would be good enough for YouTube? Or do I need to keep going to 100? And then that might require another coach. That might require hiring someone. So that's kind of my approach for business coaching. So the first one was the first marketing coach I ever hired. And I had this idea that I wanted to do a course on financial independence. I had never done anything like that before. This was in the summer of 2018. And so 3 years after leaving BlackRock, I had an audience and I hadn't never monetized it. Monetized with any products. So this coach helped me, he helped design the course, but really it was the first time someone sat me down and said, okay, if you want to succeed in this online world, you got to understand marketing. You got to understand the power of persuasion. You've got to understand what sales pages. You got to understand copywriting. You got to understand these behavioral triggers. And so this coach helped me put this first course out. The course paid for the coaching. I think it was doubled. And obviously I use the skills to this day. One of the funny anecdotes about working with this coach is, and this is for anyone trying to create kind of info products, digital products online. We sat down to create the course and I was like, oh, what should lesson 1 be, lesson 2, lesson 3? And he said, no. We got to figure out how to position this and how to sell it. And he said that on a typical course that he does, there's a 57-page Google Doc of marketing messages. These are emails, social media posts, sales landing pages, and so on. And that was kind of the first aha moment where I'm like, oh shit, this is intense. And to be fair, as I'm moving away from info products, digital products, it's in part because I don't want to create a 57-page Google Doc just to sell a course, which I've also come to appreciate that actually might not be enough pages. Don't say I didn't warn you. All right, next up, SEO, search engine optimization, another done for you coach that I hired. This was really powerful for us. Basically, search engine optimization is when people search for different words, your website shows up. And at one point, this was when we were heavy into productivity and Notion, but at one point, Notion was this big, powerful, I mean, it still is, software that everyone wanted to know all about. And if you typed any Notion term into Google, it would land on RadReads. And that was the result of this coach. And again, this kind of it wasn't done for you because I wanted to learn how to write. There's a way to write. There's a way to organize your pages. There's some technical details. And now I'm dangerous in SEO. It's not a big part of what we do, but I'm glad that I learned it. We hired a ghostwriter for Twitter. And so the promise here was I've written 300 blog posts, take them and repurpose them. This was before Elon Musk Twitter, when, it was still working more sanely. And so that was the ghostwriting coach. It worked well, and the idea was right. The problem was that my style of writing is so unique, and it just wasn't. I always felt frustrated, not at the coach, but just because I wanted to sound exactly how to say it. And there's no one else that would do that. And so I struggle with ghostwriting. This is why I don't have a big audience. And like the people that have the huge audiences have ghostwriters. And I just care so much about my voice. I feel like it's so unique. Maybe please tell me if I'm wrong about this, but that's really important to me. Okay, next one. Product design. We hired a product design expert to really extract more revenue from our course, Supercharge Your Productivity, once it had been working. This person is phenomenal. She gave us tremendous ideas. The problem was that right when we implemented her ideas, the market tanked. And so we never really got to see if the thesis was right. And then lastly, this is the big, big kahuna. So the course was making like under $20,000, like 10, 15, 20,000. And then I hired this coach, copywriting. Copywriting is the art of using words to persuade people. The example I always give about copywriting is if you said 6 reasons why you should take a nap, if that was a subject line. And if you had another subject line that said 6 research back tips, benefits of taking a nap, the second one would get 3 times more clicks. Just using that phrase, researched, evidence-backed. And so that's just a very simple example, but that anywhere that there's words, whether it's Nike's famous phrase, just do it, to, a really long page to sign up for a Tony Robbins seminar, it's copywriting. There's a science behind how those words are used. And if anyone listening to this is thinking about being an entrepreneur that involves some kind of selling, which is pretty much any entrepreneur, copywriting is one of those things where if you could just get the basics down, it is so freaking powerful. Again, very hard to hire out, especially if your voice is so unique. All right, we're going to jump into 2 nutrition ones. These are 2 fitness ones. And by the way, trainers were not included in this coaching, but I worked with a breath work coach. The initial impetus was because I had borderline/high blood pressure, and was one of the ways to naturally lower your blood pressure. Also, breath work there's more and more evidence that it is a way to actually hit altered states, so like somewhat equivalent to a psychedelic experience, and just another way to calm your nervous system. Even if you do like a box breath where you breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4, breathe in, hold 1, 2, 3, 4, breathe out 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, just that will you'll notice your stress levels go down. Breath work, to be honest, it was really powerful. It didn't help on my blood pressure because something else did, which was getting more sleep. And I didn't do some of the more altered state ones because those actually increase your blood pressure. But breath work, my friend Johnny Miller is a big proponent of this and nervous system mastery, as he calls it. And that is an area that I want to continue to explore. Nutrition, I worked with a nutritionist when I was borderline type 2 diabetes. This nutritionist helped me, very simple, cut out sugar, cut out processed sugar, cut out processed carbs. I did that for a year and boom, wiped the slate clean. So real power of like, I think that the thing that I wanted to share here is that I have the time, right? I make a lot less money than I did on Wall Street, a lot, 90% less. Um, but I have the time and one, it's obviously to spend with my family and so on, but one of the bigger ones is to heal myself holistically, right? If I had high blood pressure while I was working at BlackRock, I'd be like, okay, can I squeeze an appointment in between these two meetings? They give me a pill and I'm on this pill for the rest of my fucking life. Right? And the pill I think is pretty harmless. I think there's like a small chance of dementia. It's like under 1%. But imagine, right? And so these are the kind of trade-offs that I feel very good about making. Sometimes they still fucking stress me the fuck out, but I feel really good about that. All right, let's get on to family, kids, and marriage. All right, so kids. Now, I had this weird. I mean, I never went to therapy. My parents never went to therapy. The thought of sending your kids to therapy seems like overkill. But again, I'll just give you a simple example. Our youngest was probably 3 and having these tantrums out of the blue. Now, most of you would probably say like, oh, those are just tantrums and deal with it and they'll go away. But again, we had the time, we had the resources. This wasn't particularly expensive, even though this was actually the only therapist on the list. But we go in and there's this modality of therapy called PCIT, parent-child interaction therapy. And at its simplest form, it basically, you have 5 minutes of what's called special playtime with a kid, with your child. And there's a few rules. You can't give them any direct orders and you can't ask any questions. So if you have young kids and you're listening to this, pay attention to when you play with your child, how many times do you ask questions? The orders thing is obvious, but we give, let's play with a puzzle. Let's go play basketball. But the questions thing, and I don't remember exactly what was the case, but the thing about the questions was that questions have some power dynamic baked into it. So this whole PCIT was about leveling the playing field with your child, so you're true equals, and them leading, which ultimately would let them feel seen, right? So 5 minutes a day, and you have a few rules. You're supposed to mirror back to them. So if they lean forward to something, or they grab a doll, you grab like, oh, you're grabbing a doll, I'm grabbing a doll. Or if they're being very considerate with a toy, like, oh, there's praise, mirroring. There's 2 others, I forget. If they are being very gentle, like, oh, I see how gentle you're being, and you do that for 5 minutes a day. Folks, I'm not shitting you. Our relationship with our child is infinitely better because of that. First, the tantrums stop within like 2 months. Second, though, the connection that it gave with the child, it's really hard to explain because I know all of you listening to me are great present parents, but there's something about letting them be seen, letting them guide the interactions. We realize, especially your type A Enneagram 3s are just like, let's play math games, let's try to solve this fucking puzzle as fast as we can. And when you level the playing field, you allow the child's magic to come out. Another thing I would share about this, I kind of stopped doing it, but Lisa still does it with our youngest, who's much older now, 3 years older. And now it takes place, there's a lot of role playing. So when stuff happens in the schoolyard, like there's a mean girl type thing, mommy plays the mean girl and the kid tells the mean girl, tells them off or tells them why they're not being fair. And again, I can't give you all the details, but it's just being seen that way. And it's funny, after all these sessions, it's called special playtime. After many, many times after these sessions, Lisa would turn to me and she's like, I need special playtime from you, which is, I need to feel seen by you. Let me cede the floor to me for 5 minutes a day. So it's probably a marriage tip in there, which gets us to the last series of coaches. So these were two marriage coaches. The first one was they were not therapists. The second one were former therapists. And the first one we did through a more regular Zoom-based coaching program. This was a lot of just communicating better. It's like, I need you to, this is what I need from you. This is, again, I would summarize the first one of a lot of communicating better. So in the sense of, one example might be, when when we're at a party and someone asks a question, I know you want to answer it, but I really would appreciate it if you let me talk from time to time, or if you gave me the opening to talk, right? And so, in my marriage, I'm a very dominant personality in the marriage. And so I kind of like take up all the oxygen in the room. So there was a lot around that. One thing that I really remember intensely from that is that they gave us homework, which is eye gazing, where you just look into your partner's eyes for 5 minutes a day. That's some powerful stuff. Again, I think maybe there was this kind of loss of intimacy over the years, but there's something about looking in your partner's eyes for that long. We kind of fell off the wagon on that. This coaching was it felt very structured, like almost like the kind of exercises you would see in a book. And it was super, super powerful, right? There's a story there, and one where I want to share this because I was we were on this Zoom call, and there was this thing about, like, a lot of it was, again, about feeling seen or not feeling seen. So I never felt seen because I work so hard and no one recognizes how hard I work. And Lisa is like, you're so obsessed with your work and you don't see, how I'm struggling or what I need here. And there's just like this kind of tension there. And what we realized is, like, we both wanted to feel validated. And I remember saying to the coach, is like, I just have this deep fear that I don't matter. Right. And so that was where that's why I over communicated in certain situations, or why I emotionally detach in others. The coach had me say, he's like, well, okay, what if I told you that you matter? He's like, yeah, it's hard for me to really grok that. And so we were in this room, in this Zoom call, me and Lisa, and then the coach, who was a couple, husband and wife. And he's like, hey, is anyone home? I said, no. He's like, I want you to yell at the top of your lungs, I fucking matter. And I was like, like, I couldn't do it. I was like, I fucking matter. And then I fucking yelled it, like I said earlier, I just YOLO'd it. I was like, I fucking matter. And instantly I exploded into tears, right? Which kind of shows, like, God, there was something happening in there, right? Last coach was a couples coach. This was a 3-day retreat. This was the power of this retreat was they were very much like, it was kind of like, you fix your own issues, you fix the marital issues. Whereas the first one was kind of, how do you communicate better jointly? Is this duo here? And so the one therapist would go off with Lisa, the other would go off with me. And, a lot of it was around kind of deconstructing these stories that we would tell about ourselves, about each other, about our worthiness, our unworthiness. It was really, a lot of it too was around communicating when you were down regulated. So again, to come back to this concept of neural system mastery, we would go and, like, really downshift ourselves. And so there was all these practices so that you're not actually communicating when you are in these kind of elevated fight or flight reflexes. A lot of healing, a lot of childhood things came up. This will probably be a different episode, but they surprised us in this. And after the second day, they were like, hey, do you want to do a heroic dose of MDMA and mushrooms together? And that will be its own episode, but that was one of the most healing experiences. And I think it was cooler because we were always been open to it, but we never knew when we would actually do it. And so that was a really, really moving, healing exercise, something that we want to continue again. So to wrap that, I will continue to work with coaches for the rest of my life. I just think just the intentionality of showing, just downloading what's in your mind, right? It's just like these stories get trapped in our minds and then they eat us alive. So I will always continue. I think it's fun now to learn about these different parts of myself. Some of the coaches that I look forward to working with. So we did the episode with Jess Morey about attachment strategy. And even though I have secure attachment, it just made me think about this kind of relationship with my parents, the ideal parent, what was missing, what was present. And that is, so I actually reached out after the podcast and going to start to work with Jess. Joe Hudson is another coach that I was on his podcast. I've gotten to meet him personally. He just has this really powerful way of like, there's this whole, a lot of the coaching I've discussed is very cerebral still. There's this whole other part that gets into the land of emotions and what your body's feeling. And to me, that is the next step because I've talked through my issues for so long, so many times. And so that is another area. And then there's different methods of somatic, which is getting inside your body more. So again, ironically, Kate, the first coach said the furthest distance to travel is from your head to your heart. And that opens a much bigger question is like, what does it mean to be in your heart, to live in your heart, to feel your heart, to be connected at the heart, right? The heart is, and to go to the second coach, maybe that word, some people use heart as a substitute for the word God, right? It's almost this transcendent force. So as I get deeper into the heart, the feelings, the emotions, that's where my coaching journey is going to take me. Thanks so much for listening. Y'all are awesome.